What are you hearing from your member firms about holding the Olympics in Tokyo? I mean, if the global infections go at this rate, nobody would be going to Tokyo anyway. So doesn't it make more sense to just postpone it?
Well, good morning. I think everybody understands at this point that we are indeed in an unprecedented situation and that we really have to take some time here to see how this is going to develop. It would probably be premature to make any absolute decisions. We're going to have to wait and see.
How have the Japanese government officials coordinated the virus response? What are you hearing from your members?
Well, you'll recall that early on in this crisis, as it expanded out of China, Japan was criticized in a lot of quarters for its handling of a cruise ship that docked in Yokohama. But since that time, what we've seen in Japan is a little different from what we've been seeing recently in Europe and in the United States. The number of cases has been growing, but it's been growing at a much slower rate than elsewhere. So clearly the Japanese have been doing something right. Maybe it's the fact that they're used to wearing face masks because of the crowded conditions here through the flu season and the cold season and through hay fever season. So in any case, the rate of increase here is moderate, and some of the very strict steps that are being discussed and implemented in the EU countries and beginning increasingly in states in the U.S., we really haven't quite gotten to quite that level yet here in Japan, but it is affecting business. The inability to travel, the difficulty of planning, some suppliers and customers and clients beginning to be unable to maintain normal business operations. All of that is having some effect on our members. And so what the government is talking about doing to support the economy will, I think, be increasingly important to our members as well.
What is the most important thing that the government or the Bank of Japan could do at this point to provide assistance to small and particularly small and mid-sized businesses?
My sense is that pretty much everyone agrees that speed is one of the most important things here, because if we are indeed going to move globally to a stand down of business activity and commercial activity for all non-essential businesses, then pretty immediately businesses, individuals, consumers, and families are all going to need some support. Already in Japan, the government has announced several packages to try to address that. The government has pledged 2 trillion yen in support of government-funded loans to SME businesses. There are some subsidies in the works for families that have additional childcare needs because the schools are closed. And then the Bank of Japan, as you know, on Monday announced some major steps, including doubling their purchases of ETFs and REITs, and setting aside an additional 2 trillion yen for purchases of commercial paper and bonds. And then finally, additional amounts pledged to provide interest-free loans to Japanese banks so they in turn can lend to SME companies. So a lot of steps have been taken, but as of this morning, the government is at work on yet another package, and that, I think, demonstrates the seriousness of the situation, but also the recognition on the part of the authorities here that much more needs to be taken, much more needs to be done, rather, and it needs to be done quickly.
Chris, have you been encouraged by any signs of, I guess, flexibility or agility amongst your membership in terms of what small businesses or any businesses can do creatively to get through this hugely uncertain and the fact that we don't know when this period is going to end, right?
Right. So uncertainty, of course, is one of the big difficulties here in this situation. And no one can promise that this is going to be over by any particular month going forward. So we're all going to have to plan for the long term here. I think our members are demonstrating their flexibility. Clearly, in some industries, You need folks to show up in the office, on the job, in the factories in order to maintain production. And in some cases, that kind of production is going to be critical to the rest of society continuing to function. But in many cases, what we're finding, I think, is that businesses can operate very successfully through remote work if, in fact, they're providing services. I consult for a company in the U.S., McClarty Associates. Last night here in Japan time, we were having a global conversation with everybody online, with video feeds, et cetera. And I think that demonstrates that we can maintain services through a number of key industries working remotely with the technology that's available today. And many of our members are doing that. The American Chamber of Commerce in Japan itself is operating on just a skeleton staff in the office. Many people are operating remotely. We're not doing live in-person meetings, but we are doing these remote events for our membership to keep them informed, to keep them connected through these difficult times.